The grand chamber of the Galactic Council shimmered with opulence, its crystalline walls refracting starlight into cascading rainbows. Delegates from 1,000 star systems gathered in concentric tiers, their forms as diverse as the worlds they represented. In the center stood Zinter, the imposing Zorathian chairman, whose obsidian carapace gleamed under the chamber's luminescence. His multifaceted eyes scanned the assembly with calculated authority. "Today," Zinter intoned, his voice resonating through the chamber like a distant thunderclap, "we address the growing influence of the human race." A ripple of disdain coursed through the assembly. Though humanity had only recently achieved interstellar prominence, their rapid technological advancement and adaptability unnerved many within the council. To the elder species, humans were an anomaly, a species that defied the galaxy's natural order. In the shadow of the council's grand podium stood a solitary figure, clad in an unadorned diplomatic suit. He appeared almost comically out of place amidst the grandeur. His name was John Wick, the official envoy of Earth. To the untrained eye, he seemed unremarkable, lean, with graying temples and a gaze that betrayed neither fear nor deference. But there was something in the way he stood, motionless yet poised, that hinted at an unsettling depth. "Human," Zinter said, his mandibles clicking with derision. "Your kind presumes to join this council as equals. Yet you lack the history, the refinement, and the might of those who sit before you. Explain to us why Earth deserves such an honor." Wick stepped forward, his movements measured. The chamber fell silent, save for the hum of the translation matrix. "Chairman Zinter," he began, his voice steady, "Earth seeks not to dominate but to contribute. Our history, though brief compared to yours, is a testament to resilience. In adversity, we adapt. In peace, we innovate. The galaxy stands at a crossroads, and humanity offers a unique perspective, one forged in the crucible of constant struggle." Murmurs spread through the chamber, a mix of intrigue and skepticism. Zinter's mandibles tightened. "Pretty words," the Zorathian sneered, "but words do not earn respect. Actions do, and humanity has yet to prove its worth." Another delegate, a hulking Thorvaxian whose flesh glowed faintly with bioluminescence, interjected. "The humans are opportunists. They exploit their own planet's resources without foresight. How can we trust them with the galaxy's future?" Wick remained impassive, his eyes scanning the room like a predator sizing up its prey. The council's disdain was palpable, yet he neither flinched nor retorted. Instead, he allowed the weight of their words to hang in the air. Zinter raised a clawed appendage, silencing the uproar. "Diplomat Wick," he said, "humanity's fate within this council hinges on a trial, a test of loyalty and strength. Will you represent your species?" A lesser man might have hesitated, might have sought clarification or negotiation. Wick simply inclined his head. "I will." The council's chamber erupted in laughter, a cacophony of alien tones. To them, this human's confidence was laughable, his composure misplaced bravado. Zinter allowed himself a cruel smirk. "Very well," the chairman declared. "Tomorrow, you shall face the gauntlet of Varnock. It is a traditional test, one that has proven the mettle of countless civilizations. Survive, and Earth may earn our respect. Fail, and your kind will remain confined to the fringes of galactic affairs." The session adjourned, and the delegates dispersed, their laughter echoing through the crystalline corridors. Alone now, Wick turned his gaze to the council's central dais, his expression inscrutable. Later, in the shadows of the diplomatic quarters, Wick stood before a holographic console, reviewing files on the Gauntlet of Varnock. The trial was infamous, a brutal combat arena designed to test not only physical prowess, but also strategic cunning. No human had ever faced it, let alone survived. A soft chime interrupted his study, the projection of a man, stoic, with a scar running across his cheek, materialized before him. General Ivanov, head of Earth's Interstellar Defense Command, addressed Wick with a grim nod. "We receive the Council's conditions," Ivanov said. "Are you certain about this?" Wick's reply was curt. "They've already decided to bury us. I'm here to show them why that's a mistake." Ivanov hesitated, then said, "They don't know who you really are, do they?" "They don't need to," Wick said, his tone colder now. "Not yet." The general's hologram flickered out, leaving Wick alone once more. He closed the files and leaned against the console, his fingers drumming against its surface. For years, he had sought to leave his past behind, to bury the specter of Baba Yaga, the name whispered in fear across countless worlds. But now, the Council's arrogance had forced his hand. As dawn broke over the Council's central city, the gauntlet of Varnock loomed on the horizon. Its jagged architecture, carved from volcanic rock, radiated menace. Delegates gathered in viewing platforms, eager to witness the humans' inevitable demise. Wick stood at the arena's entrance, his expression unyielding. He surveyed the alien warriors arrayed against him, each a champion of their respective species. The air was thick with anticipation and contempt. Above, Zinter addressed the spectators. "Today, we reaffirm the values of strength and honor that bind this council. Let the gauntlet commence." The gates of the arena creaked open, and the first challengers advanced. Wick stepped forward, his movements deliberate. He was no longer just a diplomat. The council had called for a test of humanity's worth, and he intended to deliver an answer, one they would never forget. The gates of the gauntlet of Varnock groaned as they slammed shut behind John Wick, sealing him in the massive arena. The air was thick with the acrid scent of scorched metal, and the uneven ground was littered with remnants of battles long past. Towering holographic projections displayed Wick's lone figure across the galaxy's most watched networks, as billions tuned in to witness what many assumed would be humanity's final humiliation. At the far end of the arena, the first wave of challengers emerged, a squad of Corvith hunters, their insectoid exoskeletons glinting under the harsh arena lights. They moved as one, their 6 limbs propelling them with unnerving speed and precision. Each carried plasma blades crackling with lethal energy. Above, Zinter's voice boomed through the arena. "Let the trial begin. Let this human's arrogance be a lesson to all who overstep their station." Wick's expression remained unreadable as he assessed the incoming threat. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a single weapon, a combat knife forged from titanium alloy, primitive by galactic standards. The audience erupted in laughter, their derision echoing through the arena. To them, this diplomat appeared suicidal. The Corvith hunters struck first, moving in a blur. Wick sidestepped the closest attacker with calculated precision, his blade flashing in a tight arc. The alien's momentum carried it forward as its head toppled from its body, ichor spraying onto the scorched ground. The laughter from the crowd faltered, replaced by a stunned silence. The remaining hunters hesitated, their collective hive mind reanalyzing the threat. Wick used the pause to reposition, his movements fluid and deliberate. He pivoted to evade another charge, slicing through a joint in the second attacker's exoskeleton. The creature let out a guttural shriek before collapsing. In the observation chamber, Zinter's mandibles twitched. "This human is more capable than anticipated," he muttered, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. The second wave followed immediately, a lone Growthar berserker, towering over Wick at nearly 12 feet. Its reptilian hide shimmered with bioelectric currents, and its forearms flexed with brutal strength. It carried no weapons, needing none. The arena trembled under the Growthar's thunderous charge. Wick held his ground, studying the creature's movements. At the last moment, he sidestepped, his knife striking a vulnerable spot beneath its rib-like plating. The berserker roared in pain, its tail whipping toward him. Wick ducked, the tail missing him by inches, and delivered another precise blow to its exposed flank. The crowd, once jeering, now watched in rapt silence. This wasn't luck or desperation. This was mastery. Wick moved with the grace of a predator, his strikes surgical and his demeanor unshaken. The Growthar's bellows grew weaker as its strength faltered. With one final, calculated move, Wick leaped onto its back, driving his knife into the base of its skull. The creature's massive form collapsed, sending a tremor through the arena floor. Wick stood over the fallen beast, his gaze shifting to the observation platforms. "Is this the extent of your challenge?" he called out, his voice calm, but carrying an edge that sent chills through the assembly. In the council's private chambers, murmurs of unease spread among the delegates. Zinter's talons tapped rhythmically against the armrest of his seat. "This trial was meant to break him," he hissed. "Instead, it is making him a symbol." A Thorvaxian delegate, his bioluminescent form dimming with worry, spoke up. "Perhaps we have underestimated the humans. This one is different." Zinter's mandibles clicked sharply. Different or not, he will fall. Summon the Virak Horde. The third wave descended like a storm. The Virak Horde, a mercenary band of genetically engineered predators, were notorious for their efficiency and savagery. Their wolf-like frames rippled with muscle, and their claws gleamed with a venomous sheen. Wick took a measured breath as the pack encircled him, their growls reverberating through the arena. They moved in coordinated strikes, probing for weaknesses. Wick's knife flashed as he parried and countered, each movement conserving energy while maximizing impact. He dispatched the first two attackers with calculated efficiency, but the horde pressed harder, their numbers threatening to overwhelm him. It was then that the change became evident. Wick's movements grew sharper, faster, inhumanly so. He transitioned from defense to offense, his strikes precise and unrelenting. He moved as if he were no longer bound by the limits of human reflexes. The crowd, once bloodthirsty, now watched in awe and growing fear. In the council chamber, Zinter's facade of control began to crack. "Who is this man?" he demanded, his voice tinged with desperation. A nearby aide hesitated before replying. "Chairman, there are reports, whispers from the outer sectors. They call him Baba Yaga." The chamber fell silent. The name carried weight, even among the galaxy's oldest species. Baba Yaga was a ghost story, a figure whispered of in fear, a human assassin whose name alone had brought empires to their knees. To the council, such tales had seemed exaggerated, mere myths. But now, watching Wick dismantle their champions, the myth felt all too real. As the last of the Virak fell, Wick stood alone amidst the carnage. His suit, once pristine, was now streaked with alien blood. He wiped his blade clean and turned his gaze upward, directly meeting Zinter's multifaceted eyes through the observation platform. "You wanted a test," Wick said, his voice carrying through the arena. "Now you'll see what happens when you push humanity too far." The chamber erupted in chaos as the implications of his words sank in. Wick's legend was no longer a shadowy whisper. The galaxy had awakened the Baba Yaga, and they would come to regret it. The arena was silent, the air heavy with tension, as the council's delegates stared at the aftermath of the trial. John Wick stood amidst the carnage, his breathing steady, his blade still gleaming with alien ichor. The observers, many of whom had anticipated a swift and humiliating defeat, now found themselves grappling with an unthinkable realization. This human was a predator, one who had turned their meticulously curated trial into a massacre. Zinter, the Zorathian chairman, clenched his claws against the edge of the observation platform. The crystalline rail cracked under the pressure. "Send in the Draxan elite," he commanded, his voice a sharp hiss. "Do it now." A Thorvaxian delegate, his luminescent eyes dim with unease, leaned closer to Zinter. "Chairman, is that wise? The elite are valuable assets. Deploying them against a single human seems excessive." Zinter's mandibles twitched, betraying his irritation. "Excessive," he snarled. "Do you not see what this anomaly has done? He has turned the council's might into a spectacle of weakness. If we do not break him now, we invite rebellion across the galaxy." The Thorvaxian hesitated, then nodded. Moments later, the arena's gates rumbled open once more, revealing a new threat. The Draxan elite were legends in their own right, a squad of genetically enhanced warriors bred for perfection in both mind and body. Clad in adaptive armor that shimmered with alien energy fields, they moved in eerie unison, their weapons sleek and deadly. Each bore the scars of countless campaigns, their reputation as unyielding conquerors etched into galactic history. Wick tilted his head slightly, his expression betraying no concern as the squad fanned out around him. He tightened his grip on the knife, its simplicity almost mocking in contrast to the Draxan's sophisticated arsenal. The crowd, which had begun to stir with cautious admiration, now waited with bated breath. Surely, the Draxans would succeed where others had failed. The first Draxan attacked without warning, its plasma blade slicing through the air with a high-pitched whine. Wick sidestepped effortlessly, the blade missing him by a hair's breadth. In a single fluid motion, he closed the gap, driving his knife into the Draxan's exposed neck joint. The warrior collapsed, its adaptive armor flickering and dying as the crowd gasped. The remaining Draxans adjusted their strategy, falling into a coordinated assault pattern. Wick, however, moved like a shadow, anticipating their maneuvers with uncanny precision. His blade flashed again and again, each strike precise, each movement deliberate. The Draxans, for all their training and enhancements, found themselves outmatched by a foe whose very presence seemed to disrupt their rhythm. In the observation chamber, Zinter's claws drummed against the console. His multifaceted eyes darted between the live feed and the holographic display of Wick's biometrics. "This is impossible," he muttered. "No human should be capable of this." A Quran intelligence officer, his cybernetic implants glowing faintly, spoke up. "Chairman, there is something you should see. I've been analyzing his neural activity. It's abnormal." Zinter's mandibles twitched. Defined abnormal. His reflexes, his cognitive processing, they're operating at levels far beyond human norms. It's almost as if he's been augmented, but there are no visible signs of cybernetic enhancement or genetic manipulation. Zinter's claws stilled. "Then what is he?" The officer hesitated. "A weapon," he said finally. "One perfected through experience, not design." Back in the arena, the last of the Draxans fell, its adaptive armor crumbling as Wick drove his blade through its chest plate. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. For the first time in the history of the Gauntlet, the invincible Draxan elite had been defeated by a single man with a knife. Wick wiped the blade clean on his sleeve and turned his gaze upward, locking eyes with Zinter through the observation glass. The unspoken challenge in his expression sent a shiver through the Zorathian's exoskeleton. Suddenly, the chamber's lights dimmed and a deep, resonant tone reverberated through the arena. A holographic projection of the Council's emblem materialized above the platform, accompanied by an amplified voice. "Enough," it declared, cutting through the tension like a blade. It was Jorth, the venerable Hruktan overseer and one of the Council's oldest members. The delegates turned their attention to the platform as Jorth's massive, crystalline form appeared. "This trial has gone beyond its purpose," he said, his voice heavy with authority. "We sought to test humanity, not awaken a force we do not understand." Wick remained silent, his gaze unflinching as Jorth addressed him directly. "Human, you have proven your strength, but strength alone does not guarantee wisdom. Will you continue this path, or will you allow us to end this trial with dignity?" For a moment, the arena was utterly still. Then, Wick lowered his knife, his expression inscrutable. "End it," he said, his voice calm yet resonating with an undercurrent of finality. Jorth inclined his crystalline head. "So be it." The gates of the arena opened, and Wick strode toward them without hesitation. The crowd parted in stunned silence as he passed, their jeers and laughter replaced by a mix of awe and fear. Above, the council delegates watched him go, their confidence shattered, their power called into question. As Wick disappeared through the gates, Zinter turned to Jorth. "This is not over," he hissed. "That human is a threat to the balance of the galaxy, Jortha's crystalline form shimmered. Perhaps, he said, or perhaps he is the balance the galaxy has been waiting for. The chamber fell silent once more, the echoes of Wick's footsteps lingering like a specter. For the first time in millennia, the Galactic Council's unity had been shaken, not by war, but by a single man who had turned their hunt into fear. John Wick's footsteps echoed down the corridor, leading away from the arena. The sound was steady, unhurried, yet it carried a weight that the guards and officials lining the passage couldn't ignore. They avoided his gaze, their alien forms trembling in silent acknowledgement of the man who had defied every expectation. At the end of the hall, a heavily armored gate loomed, flanked by 2 Quran sentinels. Their imposing figures bristled with weaponry, yet neither moved to challenge Wick. Instead, the gate slid open, revealing a chamber bathed in harsh white light. Inside, the Galactic Council's inner sanctum awaited him. The council members stood in a semicircle, their forms towering and diverse. Zinter, still fuming from the events in the arena, was positioned at the center. Beside him, Jortha's crystalline visage radiated calm authority, though even he seemed uncertain of what would unfold. Other representatives shuffled nervously, their usual air of superiority replaced by unease. Wick stepped into the chamber and stopped at its center. His knife was gone, but the menace in his stance remained. He scanned the room, his expression unreadable. "You summoned me," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Zinter's mandibles clicked angrily. "Do you think yourself untouchable, human?" he spat. "Your actions have disrupted the Council's order. You've made a mockery of our authority." Wick tilted his head slightly, his gaze fixed on Zinter. "Your authority," he said quietly. "You mean the authority that relies on fear and subjugation?" "That authority," Jorth interjected, his crystalline voice resonant. "Enough. The trial was meant to test humanity's place in the galactic order. Instead, it has revealed vulnerabilities in our approach. Let us address the matter with wisdom, not anger." Zinter's claws scraped against the floor. "Wisdom? This human has humiliated us. His existence is a threat to the balance we have maintained for millennia." Wick took a step forward, and the room seemed to hold its breath. "You talk about balance," he said, "but balance built on oppression isn't balance. It's tyranny." The room erupted into murmurs. Some delegates nodded subtly, while others glared at Wick with thinly veiled hostility. Jorth raised a crystalline hand, and the noise subsided. "Then what would you propose, human?" he asked. Wick's eyes swept the room. "Respect," he said simply. "You've seen what humanity is capable of, not because we're the strongest or the smartest, but because we don't give up. You can't break us. And if you keep trying, you'll find out what happens when we're pushed too far." Zinter's mandibles flared. "Is that a threat?" Wick's gaze hardened. "It's a fact." For a moment, the chamber was silent. Then Jorth spoke. "Humanity has proven its resilience, its capacity for survival. Perhaps it is time we reevaluate our methods." He turned to the other delegates. "Let us not be blinded by pride. The galaxy is vast and the future uncertain. Cooperation may serve us better than conflict." Zinter's claws clenched, but he said nothing. The tension in the room remained thick, but the murmurs of agreement among some of the delegates grew louder. Jorth stepped forward, his crystalline form towering over Wick. "John Wick," he said, "you have defied the odds and stood before this council as an equal. What would you have us do?" Wick's expression remained stoic. "Recognize humanity's sovereignty. Treat us as allies, not subjects. And stop these trials. If you want to test us, do it through diplomacy, not blood." Jorth considered his words, his crystalline facets shimmering. "And if we refuse?" Wick's gaze didn't waver. "Then you'll find out why they call me Baba Yaga." The chamber fell silent once more, the weight of Wick's words settling over the council. Jorth turned to the other delegates. "Let us deliberate," he said. "But know this, the galaxy has changed today. Whether for better or worse is up to us." As Wick was escorted from the chamber, The delegates began their heated discussions. Some argued for diplomacy, others for further confrontation. But one thing was clear. The reckoning had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Galactic Council chamber, once a symbol of unassailable authority, was now steeped in uncertainty. The echoes of John Wick's footsteps had long faded, yet his presence lingered like a specter. The delegates sat in tense silence, their forms rigid with the weight of deliberation. At the center of the semicircle, Jorah stood motionless, his crystalline facets refracting the chamber's dim light into a kaleidoscope of fractured colors. "A decision must be made," Jorah said, his voice resonant and solemn. "We cannot ignore what has transpired here. The human has challenged not just our authority, but the foundation of how we govern." Zinthar, ever defiant, leaned forward, his mandibles clicking. "And you would have us concede to him? To a species that only recently left its own star system? This is madness." A Thorvaxian delegate, his luminous eyes dim with thought, countered. "Madness would be to continue underestimating them. Wick is not an anomaly. He is a harbinger. Humanity has proven its resilience and ingenuity. Ignoring that would be unwise." The chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices, each delegate advocating for their position. Some, like Zinthar, demanded retribution, seeing Wick's actions as an affront to the Council's dignity. Others called for diplomacy, recognizing the precariousness of the galactic order in the wake of such a display of defiance. Jorah raised a crystalline hand, and the chamber fell silent. "Enough," he said. "The time for words is over. We must act, but our actions must be measured. The humans' demands are not without merit. Sovereignty for humanity is a small price to pay for stability." Zinthar's mandibles flared. "And what are the other species under our dominion? If we yield to humanity, they will demand the same. Our authority will crumble." Jorah turned to face him, his crystalline form shimmering with an inner light. "Perhaps it is time for our authority to evolve. We have ruled through fear and power for millennia, but the galaxy has grown restless. If we do not adapt, we will fall." Far from the council chamber, John Wick stood on the observation deck of a Zarathian cruiser. The vast expanse of space stretched before him, stars glittering like shards of broken glass against an infinite black canvas. Beside him, Quran Intelligence Officer Vectis remained silent, his cybernetic eyes scanning the horizon. "They'll deliberate for days," Vectis said finally, his voice flat. "Maybe weeks." The Council's fear of change runs deep. Wick didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the void, his expression unreadable. "They'll make the right choice," he said eventually. "Not because they want to, but because they have no other option." Vectis's mechanical eye whirred as it adjusted its focus. "And if they don't?" Wick turned to him, his eyes cold and resolute. "Then we show them why humanity survived everything it's been through, why we endure when others fall." Vectis regarded him for a moment before nodding. "Your confidence is unsettling, but I can see why they fear you." The Council's deliberations stretched into the next cycle. Tensions ran high, but gradually a consensus began to form. Jorah's call for adaptation gained traction, swaying even the most resistant delegates. By the time the chamber doors reopened, the air was charged with anticipation. Jorah stepped forward, his towering form commanding attention. "The Council has reached a decision," he announced. "Humanity will be granted sovereignty, and the trials will cease. Furthermore, a new charter will be drafted to ensure that no species is subjected to subjugation without just cause." The room erupted in a mix of approval and dissent, but Jorah silenced them with a wave of his hand. "This is not a concession. It is an evolution. The galaxy has changed, and we must change with it." Zinthar rose from his seat, his mandibles twitching. "You have doomed us all," he hissed. "This so-called evolution will be our undoing." Jorah's crystalline gaze met Zinthar's. "Perhaps," he said, "but to cling to the past is to ensure our extinction. The future belongs to those who embrace it." Aboard the Zarathian cruiser, Vectis received the transmission. He turned to Wick, who stood exactly where he had been before. "It's done," Vectis said. "The Council has agreed to your terms." Wick nodded, his expression betraying no emotion. "Good," he said. "Now the real work begins." Vectis tilted his head. "You think they'll keep their word?" Wick's gaze returned to the stars. "They'll try. But if they don't, they'll find out that humanity isn't alone anymore. We have allies now, and we have a voice." For the first time, Vectis allowed himself a small smile. "You're an unusual man, Wick. I'm not sure if that's a compliment or a warning." Wick didn't answer. He didn't need to. The galaxy had changed, and with it, the fate of humanity. As the Zarathian cruiser powered up its engines and disappeared into the void, the seeds of a new order were sown, one that would challenge the old ways and forge a future built on something stronger than fear: respect.